Show with Chris Lewitt, episode 67. I hope that's right. Should you Instagram your tennis kid, or is it healthy to Instagram your tennis kid? It's a hot topic, at least for me in my world, in the high performance junior coaching world. You see a lot more kids being featured on Instagram now, and it's a popular way for parents to share the results of how their players doing. It's also a popular way for academies and coaches to scout talent now, which is a very new phenomenon where you have even agents, management companies, coaches, and even probably other players and families scouting other players online on social media. I just use Instagram as a proxy for all social media platforms, and it's just a very popular platform that people are using. But is it healthy? Should you Instagram your kid? What are the different ways to do it? And kind of let's get into that world a little bit and see if we can. I'll answer any questions you guys have if you're on live, and we can talk about whether it's healthy or not, and what are some of the negatives, what are some of the positives. So I saw a question pop up there. That's why I paused. If you have any questions about social media and your players, let me know. Scott, I'm seeing your comment, but if you have a question, let me know. So I was talking about this with my wife because, as you guys may know, I have 4 kids myself, and they're all athletes. Except for I guess my toddler's an athlete too. But I have some older kids who are athletes. My son is a pretty serious competitive runner, and I do sometimes share his results on social media, but rather infrequently. Not. I don't have a channel for him. I don't have an account for him, and I think the way we would describe that is very casual sharing on Instagram. The way my wife and I talked about it, we said that that's sort of like a proud parent, or just uh, a casual sharing of results with either family or the public at large. And so, like, those are kind of the first 2 levels in our mind on social media. You have your kid does well in a tournament, or like in my case, my son does well in a race. Sometimes I'll share the result with people. So some people may not even be comfortable with that. There are some parents who are very private, and some families who will only share with their family members, so they don't do any public sharing, and they may not want to share anything publicly about their kids. And I think that's getting more and more rare, because in the world we live in, this is a crazy world where everything is filmed, everything is photographed, everything seems to get onto the internet, online now. I was thinking back, I must be getting old, because I remember the days when there was no cell phone, and gosh, I used to have to call up the USTA office to get my latest ranking. There was nothing on. There was no online, no quick search for rankings, and I had no idea what other junior players were doing. Like, I played in New England juniors. I had no idea what they were doing with their training, or nowadays, everything is like, so many players are featured online. You can follow a whole player's development on their Instagram account, if they're being shared a lot. So some parents may so you have the private ones, you have the casual share, and then you have sort of the proud parent. And that's what I was sort of getting at in terms of classifications. Proud parent can get pretty serious. Like, if a parent's really proud, and they start sharing a lot, that can be that can bring a lot of exposure to their son or daughter. Um, that I separate from a parent who's trying to be a social influencer. So that to me starts to become like a business venture, the highest level of social media sharing, where you take your kid and you maybe set up their own account and you actively manage their account like you're trying to build a following and you're trying to build an audience and you're trying to basically grow uh, build a marketing engine for your kid to help them basically secure sponsors, secure uh, help from academies and coaches, maybe secure an agent. Basically, use social media to build your son or daughter's brand. To me, that is like a business, it's like an entrepreneurial venture. That is a whole nother level, and that's becoming more and more common. I've had many students actually. Elite students whose their parents are doing that. Their parents are actively managing an account for them and basically trying to build up a brand and become a social influencer on social media, because that brings power and it brings at the end of the day it brings money. So I think you have to ask yourself as a parent. I know a lot of parents watch this show and listen to this podcast, and we do get a lot of coaches who also listen in too. I think it's an interesting topic for coaches as well. But if you're a parent, are you going to try to build a brand around your kid and feature them on their own in their own account, or are you more like a proud parent who's just trying to share the successes and the ups and downs of you're trying to basically document your child's junior years and sort of save the memories for the future, and you have a lot of joy in your kids' athletics and you want to share that with families and friends and the public. That is very different than trying to brand your child and build a business and a marketing engine around your child. And then you, like I said, you have sort of the casual share, or maybe even at the other end of the spectrum, parents who don't want to share anything and they want to keep anything private. Or maybe you have parents who are very competitive, and we know that in the junior tennis world, parents are hyper competitive, that they may not want to share information, videos, photos about their kids training because they don't want other parents to have inside knowledge, about what's going on with their kid and what their kid's doing and who they're training with and where they're going. And I'm sure there are parents who are hyper competitive who are probably consider that they don't want to share information that other players and parents could read and learn about. It may sound crazy, but that's sort of the paranoid world of competitive junior tennis, hyper competitive junior tennis. So I think probably the most people fall into the casual share or the proud parent. And then more frequently now you see parents trying to brand their kid. So why would they do that? Well, to me it comes down to money. And they may not want to admit that or not, but if you're creating an account and featuring your kid and actively managing that account day in and day out, week in and week out, trying to build an audience, posting regularly, you're basically running a small business. You're running a marketing engine. You're trying to build out an advertising marketing type platform for your kid, because if you can build your influence, you can get stuff, money, sponsors, equipment, clothing deals. Basically, you're basically like your kid's agent, your kid's manager, and you're working to position yourself to get deals. Like, for example, new phenomenon. Like, if you're a coach out there, I don't know if this has happened to you, but more and more I've had players approach me for training. They want elite training with me, but they don't want to pay full price. So they come to me with like a deal like this. Hey, I've got X amount of followers on Instagram. Let's work out a deal. You train my kid, and we'll give you some exposure on Instagram. Like, so parents will use their kids' influence, the amount of followers they have, the exposure they can bring to cut deals for their kids. Try to get discounted training, try to get free stuff, try to get sponsors, especially try to get scholarships at academies. I think that is really a really common approach now, where parents will build up a brand for their kid with the hopes of securing an agent, a marketing deals, sponsorships, and scholarships at academies, where they can come to an academy and say, hey, look, I've got this. This is my kid. Look how many followers I have. Look at the exposure I can bring you. Let's cut a deal. My kid can train at your academy, and this will be a net win-win for both of us. So I think this is a very new phenomenon in junior tennis. It's probably happening in other sports as well, but I just know the tennis world. And so, is that healthy for the kids? So, I think it can be okay. It really depends on how the account is managed. How much does the kid even know about the account? Like, I've had little kids who probably don't even know what Instagram is, but they're huge stars on Instagram. And you have to think about the child's psychological well-being as they get older, the pressure that they feel. It's kind of a weird situation. Like what if the kid starts to do worse, like they're not playing that well, or they get some bad results, or they get injured. I think parents need to consider, if they're going to put the spotlight on their kid, that creates a lot of pressure on the child. It creates, if the child's aware of it, it can create a situation where might not be the most healthy situation for the kid. It's riskier. It's definitely riskier to take a kid and make their own account and start featuring them, and start building marketing and basically branding them almost like a product, because things in junior tennis don't always work out. Kids can have setbacks. Kids can have injuries. Kids can get burned out. Kids can struggle. And to have always the pressure of the camera on you, like, what do you guys think? It's a little crazy to think about, like, having a camera on a kid from 5 or 6 or 7 years old. You're constantly filming, like the player feels like the spotlight's on them all the time, and everything's being documented. Like, there's a beauty to documenting a child's growth and development, a child's athletic prowess, a child's results. There's something beautiful about that. The modern technology, we're able to capture all these memories, but there's also this tremendous, like, potentially negative aspect with the spotlight always being on, kids feeling pressure all the time to look good, to play well, to get perfect results. This is a really tough question, guys. Another thing that occurred to me is, from a Spanish perspective, like, let's say the perspective of Tony Nadal. Like, I'm a huge fan of the philosophy of Tony Nadal, and the idea of putting your kid on a stage and making them the center of the universe and putting the spotlight on them, and basically telling them that they're a star, like a rock star, like a superstar, and featuring them all the time online, on social platforms, is anathema, I think, to the philosophy of Tony Nadal, who basically believes in building, keeping kids down, like making kids humble, making kids try to force kids the opposite way, that they don't feel like they're the center of the universe, that they don't feel like they're a young superstar. And to me, that's a real danger. The more you post, the more you lean towards the end of the spectrum, or the classification, like you're building a brand, maybe you're really proud parent, and you're doing a lot of posts of your kids, very frequent posts of your kids' tennis. I think there's definitely a danger that your kid starts to develop an ego as they start to become aware of it. If you're cluing them into the channel, if the way you do it, like if you're filming them and you're posing them and you're asking them to read, you're showing them stuff. If the parent is like making the kid feel like a star and building up their ego, that could be potentially big downfall, big pitfall of constantly filming and posting, filming and posting. The kid starts to develop too big an ego. Geez, we have a big problem in junior tennis with as kids develop their national or their international ranking. I've seen it so many times where kids develop this huge ego, like big, uh, really losing their humility. And that is definitely something to watch out for as a parent. Be careful. Be careful when you put the spotlight on your kid. You tell them they're so good, and you say, look how many views you got." And it's exciting maybe that you're sharing these things with your kid, or look how many followers we have on this channel as the kid gets older. I think that is potentially really bad in terms of the character development, because young kids should be taught to be humble. They should be taught that the world doesn't revolve around them, that they are not that they are no better than everybody else. They're just a human being who happens to play good tennis. They're not better than everyone else just because they're a tennis star. At least if you believe in the philosophy of Tony Nadal. And I guess I'm kind of along those lines. I think it's a little bit dangerous as your kid gets older. If they're plugged into what you're doing on social media, that could be a big potential pitfall. But let's say if you're just putting your kid on Instagram casually, or as a proud parent, I mean, I think it's perfectly healthy, and it's not as high a risk as if you're making your kid into a brand. If your kid is the center of it has their own account, and you're really posting to build an audience. The less you post, probably the less risk there is. The more you post, the more you're sharing, probably the more risk there is maybe to your kids' character development, or adding additional pressure to your kids. So you gotta, as a parent, think about what is the personality of your kid, how are they wired. Maybe you decide you don't share with them for a while. And I was thinking, if things don't work out, what's the worst that could happen? If your kid's not really clued into the channel, if your kid's not really aware of the the audience watching them all the time, that's probably healthier. I think it's the idea of, like, your kid knows that they're a star, and they know that people are watching them all the time, and maybe they feel pressure to perform, like performance pressure. We see that in young child actors. My wife is from the theater world and from the acting world, and she mentioned how potentially unhealthy it is when you have young child stars. As they get older, they develop a lot of behavioral issues and maybe psychological challenges, because they've always been sort of managed and spotlighted. But the same could be true with your tennis kids. So you have to be really careful as they get older, and as you start sharing with them. Maybe it's healthier to limit the exposure that how much they know about what you're doing on social media, at least when they're young. That's probably the healthiest, because probably more risky to take your kid and share with them constantly about what they're doing. Say, hey, look how well this video did, and look how well that video did. If you're doing a lot of preparation, and if you're really stylizing the videos, like if it becomes less and less natural, less and less casual, and more like a production, that is probably less healthy for the child. Just let the kid play tennis. If you want to document their development, okay. But when it becomes a production, and they're like a little child star, and you're filming everything maybe over and over again just to get the drill right, or the video as stylized as you can, and if you're doing a lot of if there's a lot of production involved, I think that again builds up more and more the ego of the kid. What do you guys think? If you have any questions about social media and the influence on the tennis world now, be happy to take your questions. You could also leave questions in the comments section. We get a lot of questions through comments, and also through my email. You can email me, chris@chrislewitt.com or chrislewitt@gmail.com. I take a lot of parent questions that way. But this is a strange world that we live in, where everything is featured now online. I know that like, I have friends in the management industry who send me links to different players for me to, like, evaluate and say, what do you think about this kid? What do you think about that kid? I'm sure that parents are scouting kids on social media, other like other opponents and other players that they want to learn about. You can learn a lot from someone's social media account, from someone's Instagram account. And then you have parents who are, I think, less and less, more less and less frequently, but parents who are very private, want to keep things wrapped up, don't want to share very much. It's a strange world that we live in. I think that as parents, we need to consider the personality, the individuality of our child, and whether what are we going to do if things go wrong. Like what is the game plan if things turn south. Like if you have um, I don't want to use specific examples from my students, but like if you've been featuring a kid on Instagram and they decide not to play tennis anymore, or they get burned out, or they get a bad injury, how are you gonna shut down the account? I know that it's possible. I don't know the technical details, but I'm sure it's possible to pull a channel or an account, right? So let's say worst case scenario, you're featuring your kid, you're maybe even building an audience, because at the end of the day, it's a really good business to build an audience. You're gonna basically try to monetize your kid. I know parents have a lot of debate about that. Is it right to monetize your kid or not? But I'm saying it's okay. If people they need money. They need to support their families. For some families who are not from a life of privilege, they're not wealthy. The player could be the meal ticket. The player could be the ticket to financial freedom for the family. So like it's okay to try to monetize your kid, but we got to try to do it in the healthiest way possible. What are you going to do if things turn bad? How are you going to disconnect the account if things turn south? And then how are you going to set up like a wall, like a partition, to protect your child and keep their ego in check? Those are really important questions if you're looking to monetize your child's tennis development. But I don't think in the world we live in, the modern world, with the way technology is and the way the tennis world operates in terms of the business aspect, that I think it would be wrong for me to say to all the parents out there who are looking to monetize their child's uh, training and development on social platforms that is wrong, because I think it's a very privileged stance for some parents to say, look, that's not healthy. You shouldn't feature your child that much. I think that in today's world, if you have a very, very talented kid, you want to leverage that. You might want to feature them and secure a sponsor, try to get a deal at an academy, try to get a deal with coaches, and that might be very lucrative if you can make it work. But maybe but make sure that you're trying to protect your kid, protect their mental health, keep the pressure off them as much as you can, and please try not to build up their ego too much so that they lose all of their humility, because humility is very important in the character building process. So guys, appreciate you tuning in. We'll talk more about this on another program. I'll see you guys on the next program. We are actually doing a really cool interview in the next show. Our first interview for the podcast going to be Henry Holtz and Jonathan Holtz, his dad. So Henry Holtz is one of the best 10-year-olds in the country. We're going to be doing a little interview with them. First time we've done an interview on the podcast, but I think if you're parents or coaches, you probably enjoy learning about what Henry's done in his development and the way his dad manages his career. And Henry is featured on Instagram, but I think in a proud parent capacity. So we'll talk to Henry and his dad on the next show. Thanks, guys.